In today's video, I'm going to be going over the most common mistakes that drivers make that ruins their transmission and how you can steer clear of them. And many of these aren't big mistakes. Often they're just subconscious habits that we don't even realize we're doing. There's also a few old misconceptions about transmissions that you may have, and I'll get into those as well. And when it comes to shifting an automatic transmission, I think everyone's pretty aware that you don't want to be going down the highway at 60 miles an hour and rip it into park. That would be bad. But what a lot of people do without thinking about it is they shift into gear while the wheels are still moving. I mean, think about it. You're late for work, you're pulling out of the driveway in reverse, and before you come to a stop, you slam it into drive and take off. The thing is, in a situation like that, even though you're going less than 3-4 miles an hour, shifting into an opposing direction, so drive when you're rolling backwards, is super hard on the transmission and a lot of components in your driveline. Because you're essentially throwing the mechanism against the entire weight of the car, even if it's moving slowly, and it's really hard on it and not how it was designed to operate. So what you're supposed to do is come to a complete stop, whether you're going backwards or forwards, with the brake, then you shift into gear, and then you can take off. So if you're someone that's late for work a lot, or you're just an impatient driver in general, those little stresses every day on the transmission are gonna ruin it way faster than it would have if you're driving properly. May seem obvious, but the same applies to shifting into park before you're fully stopped. You don't wanna do that. Another mistake people make with their transmissions is trying to save gas by shifting into neutral when going down long hills. The problem with doing this is that if you're in an older car, say pre-2000s, the oil pump in your transmission is actually partially run by the engine and the engine speed. So when the engine speed drops because you're in neutral, you're not lubricating the transmission well enough. Now with newer cars, that function is more controlled by computers, so it's not as big of an issue. But what can still happen is that shock that happens when you shift back into drive. So because the engine is idling, going slow, and your wheels are going quickly and they're connected to the transmission, there's a sudden transfer of speed that has to happen, and it's really stressful on your transmission. You may even feel that in the car. The car may lurch suddenly as it's trying to catch the engine up to speed. And if you were to do this once or twice every once in a while, it's not a big deal. But if you're regularly doing that, trying to save gas, you're wearing your transmission out a lot faster than you need to. And here's the kicker. It's not actually saving you any more gas than when you're in drive. Cars today, when they're in drive and decelerating or the gas isn't being pushed, actually completely shut off the flow of gas. 100% of the fuel flow is shut off at the injectors. So when you're going down a hill in drive, you're not using any gas. So there's no reason to go into that neutral. Furthermore, driving down a hill in neutral is wearing your brakes out faster, and you can't accelerate if you need to, so it's not as safe. The next mistake I see people make all the time is when they park on an incline and they put the car in park and they turn it off and let go of the brake, and that happens. So that jerking sensation after you let your foot off the brake when you're in park is the entire weight of the car rolling back and resting on a little gear inside your transmission to hold the car in place. When you're on an incline, you can imagine that's thousands of pounds resting on a little metal gear in your transmission. And that's not how it was designed. When your car's on level ground, it's all good. But when it's on an incline, that's way too much weight on that little pawl gear in your transmission. Have you ever noticed when you get back in your car after you've been parked on a hill and you shift out of park, it's really stiff and then sometimes goes bam into drive? That's because that gear is super bound up and under pressure from resting on the hill. And that's why every car has one of these, a parking brake. Now, I don't know why, but a lot of people don't ever use their parking brake, or if they do, it's to do donuts in the parking lot. So the proper parking procedure, anytime, especially on hills, is you stop the car with the foot brake, you engage the parking brake, then you shift into park, and then you get out of the car. Doing it this way makes the parking brake take the stress of the weight of the car on the hill and not your transmission. The next mistake that I see people make is because they have a trailer hitch on their car, they think they can tow whatever they want. I've even heard people say, well, I have a small engine, but I'll just tow something slower. One common thing I see is people with 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder small SUVs, and they have a one-time life event, like they're moving and they have a trailer, they want to move all their furniture, or maybe they want to go on a weekend adventure and they put a camper trailer on the back. They think because they have the hitch, it'll work out just fine. What they don't realize is that the torque converter in the transmission slips gears when the engine doesn't have enough power to tow something in a gear. It's like slipping so that the engine can stay running and the wheels can stay moving. And what that does is create a ton of heat in your transmission. And what quickly will happen if you're towing something with too small of an engine is that the fluid in the transmission overheats, burns, and fails. It only takes one time of cooking your transmission fluid for you to ruin a transmission. So, how do you know what you can tow with your car? Well, it's going to be listed somewhere in your owner's manual or with the hitch that you got. You can easily find that information online somewhere. But you really want to make sure that you're matching your load with your engine. Now, the next mistake people make is not letting their transmission warm up enough before they really step on the gas. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do your grandpa's old warm-up tradition of 30 minutes in the driveway, because that's actually not great for your engine. But you want to drive gently for the first 5 minutes or so to let that transmission fluid warm up and circulate properly before stepping on it. If you start driving really hard before the transmission fluid is properly warmed up, it's not going to protect or lubricate the metal moving parts in the transmission enough, and you're going to be prematurely wearing out the transmission. So again, doing this once or twice is not going to hurt your car that bad. But remember, we're talking about habits here. So make it a habit to let your transmission get up to temperature before you step on that gas too hard. Okay, let's talk about some misconceptions a lot of people have about automatic transmissions. One comment I get a lot is that you can't downshift your car because it's bad for your transmission. Well, the simple fact is, that's not true. They're designed to be downshifted to slow the car down. And then there's the claim that it's cheaper to replace brakes by not downshifting than it is to replace the transmission. Well, again, the transmission's designed to do that. And furthermore, you can burn up and destroy your pads and rotors by one long downhill where you're holding your brakes. And if you do that drive regularly, that's a lot of brake replacement. And in the end, it's not cheaper than replacing your transmission. The next misconception is an old one, but I still hear it floating around. And that is, driving with your hand on the shifter is bad for your transmission. Well, it is actually true, but it only applies to manual transmission cars, where the shifter is literally manipulating a mechanism in the transmission that shifts gears. So you're putting pressure on that mechanism, which could potentially force it out of gear. On an automatic, literally this stick is just manipulating a cable, which changes the gears in the automatic transmission. So resting your hand on it in this case is not a problem. Just a quick shift into another topic. Don't forget to subscribe to Budget Mechanic, because you are not going to want to miss out on any upcoming content. Another common transmission mistake people make is forgetting to change their transmission fluid, because everybody knows about oil and changing that every 5,000 miles or whatever. But a lot of people forget you got to change your transmission fluid as well. And I think one reason people forget is that the intervals for changing transmission fluid are much longer usually than oil. And so a lot of people don't think about them as often. One common thing that happens too is people buy used cars. They don't know when the transmission fluid was done, and they don't really think about it. But if it was like 150,000 miles since it was done or never done when you bought the car, and you wait another 50,000 miles, that can be trouble. When transmission fluid gets really old and dirty, that's when you start getting symptoms like transmission slipping or slamming hard into gears. And unfortunately, by that point, it's probably too late, and you're looking at getting a transmission rebuild in the near future. So save yourself the money and the headache, and just stay on top of your transmission fluid changes. If you're interested, we made a great video on knowing when it's time to change the transmission fluid in your car, and we'll include a link to that. You can check it out. Hey, if you like this content on transmissions, then you're definitely going to want to check out another video we made right here on the age-old subject of whether you should flush your transmission or just change the fluid.